So I was a little nervous. I told Vic and Ellen and Donna and Megan when we went on the visit, I said, how am I going to talk to a room full of behavioral health specialists about depression and anxiety? I mean, you know exactly what it is. It's not a surprise that someone who functions in daily life also deals with depression and anxiety. You'd be like, yeah, thanks, Tren. I got my PhD. So happy you told us something we already know. And I'm also a bit of a procrastinator, so yesterday I was still like, how am I gonna tailor this to a room full of people who work with people just like me every single day? And then I heard Jeffrey Canada speak yesterday morning at the Horizons for Homeless Children, a women's breakfast. And he was talking about how oftentimes we don't know in what ways we touch people. And how they influence us, and how the tiniest thing that you may do for someone may impact their life forever. And I thought, that's it. Like Charlie Brown when he discovers they need a Christmas tree, that was my moment. And I thought, all of the people in my life, all of the therapists that I've worked with, and the pediatrician who first diagnosed me when I was an adult, that was what I wanted to share with you guys today, because I don't know if you're told often enough how important you are to us, those of us who struggle with something that is so stigmatized and still looked at as maybe a misunderstanding, not knowing what mental health really is, how impactful you've been. But I was also thinking about those kids who live in poverty and how a lot of times they're just not acknowledged as people. And that was the toughest thing for me, was the acknowledgement of being sick, of having anxiety, of having depression, because from the time that I was a little kid, I just knew, you know, you just kind of know something's not right. And the first time I noticed it, I think I was 5. And my parents sent me away to, I was a brownie, you know, Girl Scout. I went away to a camp, a little A-frame camp, and I brought my little Holly Hobby. Those of you who aren't like of a certain age probably don't even know who Holly Hobby is. I had a little sleeping bag, and it was in East Troy, Wisconsin, and I was so excited to go. And in the middle of, I was so homesick. I just had this sick feeling the whole time I was there. And in the middle of the night, I got up. This is gross. I puked on myself, like in the sleeping bag, got up and was calling for my mom and dad, and then just climbed back into bed. And this happened over and over and over again when I was a kid. I would go away from home, I would be with my family, and I would be so overcome with anxiety. And my parents chalked it up to, she's just an anxious kid. She gets homesick. What a weirdo. You know, I remember a time when I was at Disney World and I got sick, and my mom gave me like a barf bag with a diaper underneath it. I think they took a picture and made fun of me. And we wonder why I was in therapy. But at the time, and I don't look at my parents and say, how could you not have known that that was anxiety? How could you not have known? Because how would my parents know? How would they know that a kid who, for all other intents and purposes, was this precocious, outgoing, kid who never could shut up, how would they think that she was anxious or depressed? It was just being a kid. So at that point, I didn't know. I wasn't acknowledged. And I went through life feeling this way over and over and over again. And then there was another sort of benchmark where I knew something isn't right. And I'm Catholic, and I took CCD, and I was in CCD class, and it's one of those memories. You know, you have those memories that are just seared in your brain, and you'll never forget it. We had to have a circle. And we had to, talk about certain questions that were posed to us. And one of the questions, and to this day, by the way, I don't know why you would pose this in a CCD class, was what would upset you more, if your parents died, or would you feel that you might commit suicide? Right? And at the time, I thought it was an odd question, but I thought maybe they were trying to get us to open up, to talk about our feelings, to talk about ourselves. And I remember I was like the second or third kid to go, and I might have even been the first, and I said that I was afraid that I would commit suicide. And everybody looked at me like, what? And I remember feeling so ashamed because everybody else said I would be sad or I'd be worried that my mom and dad would pass away. And I thought, God, I'm so selfish. Who would think that? And I never in a million years thought to myself, okay, this is an indication of a deeper problem. So I tucked it away further and further down and just ignored it. I ignored all of the signs until I graduated from college, got a job, and again, I was struggling. I could not crawl out of these constant sort of back and forth dark holes. And again, I just wanted someone to tell me what was wrong. By the time I got out of college, I started to realize something isn't right. These feelings aren't normal. And again, this is one of those memories. I remember, and I always preface this story. This story is the hardest for me to tell because it involves my dad. And my dad is awesome. My dad took me to baseball games when I was a little kid. It's why I love baseball. I wanted to go hunting with him. He was kind. He always let me sit on his lap and watch Packers games. He's also very Catholic and very tied to his faith. And I remember in 1999, we were watching the All-Star game, which took place at Fenway Park. The whole Ted Williams wheel him out. It's to this day, it's my favorite All-Star game. Partially because I was watching with my dad. And I remember I just graduated from college and I was in what I just figured was a funk. I couldn't get a job. I was, still waiting tables and working behind the scenes at a television station, but I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't eating and I was sad all the time and I didn't want to go anywhere. And by this point, I was self-aware enough to think, I think I might be depressed. And so I thought, okay, my dad and I are close. I'm going to say something to my dad about it. And so we're in our rec room, and I say to my dad, I tell him all that. I tell him how I'm feeling. And he says to me, well, just pray. God will fix it. And it was crushing. And he didn't mean it to be crushing. And he might watch this, and it would break my heart if he thought that it was his fault. But it was so crushing because all I wanted was someone to acknowledge that something was wrong. And it felt so isolating and so alone. So another year went by where I just stuffed it down and didn't talk about it. And I finally got that first TV job, and I finally moved away. And I thought, okay, it'll be better. I've got what I want now. I got this job. We always think these external things will make us feel better. And so I'm working in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I'm, logging cameras around. And at the end of the day, I'm not just tired. I don't want to leave the house. There are times on my off days that I blow the blinds shut. I don't get off my couch. And at this point, I know something is really wrong because there are days where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to live anymore. And I have everything. I have a loving mom, a loving dad, a great sister and brother, and I have this job that I've wanted since I was 8 years old. So what is wrong with me? What did I do? I kept tying it back to things that I had done years before. This is a punishment for this. This is a punishment for that. I did something wrong. And so I had to go back to Milwaukee. Eau Claire, if Wisconsin kind of looks like a little bit like an opposite Michigan, an opposite glove. Eau Claire is about right here. It's about an hour east of Minneapolis. So I drove back to Milwaukee. My mom needed my help with my brother, and I had to take him to the pediatrician. And when my brother was done, my brother's 7 years younger than me, I said, Brian, wait outside for a second. I want to ask the doctor something. I told the doctor all my symptoms, and he looked at me in not the best bedside manner and goes, oh, well, you're depressed. But as harsh as it was to just have someone very matter-of-factly put it to me, I thought, oh, thank God. Now I know what to do. Now I know what's wrong. Now I can go seek and find help. And so I did. So for the first time ever, I went and I saw a therapist, and I had someone listen to me and talk to me and understand what I was going through and put me on medication. And I slowly started to feel better. And I slowly started to feel a little bit more like myself. But I'll be honest, that was in the year 2000. It wasn't until this year that I really got an entire handle on it, that I didn't have a lot of, and maybe we'll have another roller coaster ride, but so far it's kind of a nice, smooth, Midwestern, not hilly ride. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders to know that somebody cared and that someone wanted to help me and that someone understood what I was going through. But I still suffered in silence. I still didn't talk about it. I didn't even tell my parents. I didn't tell my parents I was on medication. I didn't tell my parents that I was going to therapy because I was so afraid that they would feel guilty, that they would feel like it was their fault, which I think is one of the biggest burdens of mental illness and behavioral health is that stigma that it still carries, that there's something innately wrong with you. And when you were talking, and you have a cool name like me, or not, my name's weird, I should actually say, but your name's cool, and so I can't remember it. But when you were talking about how when you went in and you felt like they told you something was wrong with you, oh, could I identify with that? Because you just felt so broken and so wrong. And so I kept it to myself. I think I might have told a friend or two, but I really didn't talk to anybody about it. And then fast forward 12 years, I essentially just dealt with it by myself. I might make funny jokes about my therapist because I lived in New York for a while and everybody had a therapist. But I really didn't deeply talk about it because I feared that if I did, I wouldn't get another job. I feared I would lose my health insurance. And I just was worried that people would think I was incapable. Like, when is she gonna break? You know, when is she gonna have an anxiety attack? When is she going to go into this dark place that she can't come out of? And, you know, we can't hire someone like that. I don't wanna date someone like that. I don't wanna be friends with someone like that. And then in 2012, I was sitting in the press box at Miller Park, which is where the Brewers play in Milwaukee. And it came across on Twitter that Junior Seau had committed suicide. And I didn't know Junior well. I'd interviewed him a couple of times, but it was an athlete that I had grown up watching. It was an athlete that I had admired, and it just, for whatever reason, that particular suicide just was like a gut punch to me. And I remember reading reactions to his death and comments from his family about how they knew he was struggling, but they didn't know what to do and they didn't know how to help him. And then I saw the opposite, where people were saying how selfish he was and how could he do this to his family. And both sides, one side made me angry. The side that blamed him for his disease made me angry. And the side that felt like they couldn't do anything made me sad. And so I thought, that's it. I'm gonna talk about it. And it just so happened that at that time, there was a writer who was working with me in Milwaukee on a feature piece, because, I don't know, I'm from Milwaukee, and he just decided to do a feature on me. It's weird to talk about yourself, by the way. Even though I sort of do it for a living, it's like odd to be like, yeah, somebody wanted to write an article on me. Cool. It's like weird to say out loud. My parents are, if they're gonna watch this at some point, they're gonna go, oh, God. That's what's happened to you. But I emailed him and I said, Howie, I don't want to talk about the fact that I, did this or did that or, run marathons, whatever. I said, I want to talk about my depression. And he said, wait, what? He said, you suffer from depression? And I said, yeah, I do. And I have terrible anxiety and I struggle with it every single day. And I said, I don't know why. I didn't really know Howie that well, but I said, I just feel like you're the person. I want you to tell my story. And I want to read, of course, my iPad. Like, here we go. I have an iPad with me at all times, but I don't really use it, as you can see when I talk. And then when I need it, what's there is not there. But I want to read you an excerpt from that article because I think he could illustrate better how I was feeling, I think, than even I could in my own words. So this is the lead to this story, which, by the way, came out in September of 2012. 5 days after I took the job here. So you can imagine the anxiety and the stress and the worry that I felt living in Boston, working at a new job, and not knowing what the reaction would be. She is sitting in a closet and she is all alone and she is bawling and she cannot stop. Trenni Kusnierek has just come home to Milwaukee, an all too rare occurrence for the budding national TV personality. It is 2009, and her new job with the fledgling MLB network takes her from its New York studios to ballparks all over the country, just never enough to Milwaukee. She loves this place, adores its sports teams and its people, relishes running its streets and biking its trails. It's where she was born and schooled, where she cut her broadcasting teeth, where family and friends always welcome her back with the warmth of a summer day. And that's why, on this summer night, those loved ones have gathered at her boyfriend's house. They are upstairs in the midst of revelry. She is downstairs in the midst of misery. Normally I'd be singing and dancing, she says, just what you'd expect from the bubbly blonde behind the microphone. But now, normal is nowhere to be found. She is trying to feign happiness, as she's done so many times before, but this time, it doesn't work. People try to engage her, but her mind's too foggy to match their efforts. It was like robotic, she said, so I excused myself. The place I excused myself to was a closet, and I curled myself up in a ball and I just started crying because it was so bad, and I didn't know why it was still so bad. And I decided in that moment, I can't do this anymore. I have to find somebody that can help me. and I found a great therapist in New York, and then I actually relocated back to Milwaukee, and it cost me my job. I left New York because it was just too much, but I was too embarrassed to tell my employer why I was leaving. So I said, oh, I travel all the time anyway, and it's cheaper to live in Milwaukee. I'm paying all this rent in my New York apartment, and I don't live in it. But the reality was, I couldn't leave my New York apartment. I would sit in and I would watch Glee for hours on end because it was the only thing that probably kept me alive at the time. And so I moved home and I found Liz. And Liz was amazing. Liz was the first person who didn't just bring me into her office and have me talk about what I was going through. She had me try and figure out where it came from and why I felt these feelings. And she knew how to vacillate between being someone who was a little tough on me, knowing sometimes I needed a push and tough love, and someone who sometimes would just let me cry in her office. She worked with me on EMDR, which was helpful, and it was just something new. And she worked with me with a healer, which was one of the weirdest experiences, but you know what? Everybody tries anything, I think, when you want to feel better. And she gave me the strength to move on. She gave me the strength to realize that I didn't have to be what my disease was, that I wasn't contained to that. And she also helped me get the courage to move to Boston. And so in 2012, when that article came out, I had just moved to Boston. And again, it was a roller coaster ride. Here I was, this new town, all these things. And then I met Carol. And Carol was my therapist in Brookline. And Carol was also from the Midwest. And Carol also knew exactly how to identify with me and exactly how to talk to me and exactly how to make me feel like it was okay to feel what I was feeling, and it was also okay to like Boston more than I liked Milwaukee. I'm sorry, Milwaukee. Because there was a guilt there. And all of those things, all of those feelings that I'd had for so many years were just kind of stuck inside, and she slowly helped them kind of come up. And then someone reached out to me when Kevin Paul DuPont wrote an article about me in the Boston Globe and said, you know, you might benefit from seeing my friend Elisa. And I said, okay. They said, it's a little bit of a different therapy. It's, now I can't even remember what it's called. I'll look it up and you'll ask me questions later and I'll tell you. But it's kind of a long, funny name, and it starts with a C, and it's this totally different sort of therapy, but it really is about finding the root cause of what you're going through. And if Elisa was here right now, I would tell her she changed my life. You guys change people's lives. I would not be standing up here talking to you today if it wasn't for the people who acknowledged what was going on with me, believed my stories, but also knew that you don't have to live like that. And sometimes the techniques were a little out there, and sometimes I had to imagine being in utero, and I found a spirit animal, but you know what? It worked for me. So if you think your idea is crazy, which I'm not sure if you should use that at a mental health event, try it anyway, because for me, it was everything I needed. It was everything I needed. And now I feel like I can go out and I can talk to people and I can tell them what's going on. And now I've taken what I've gone through and the processes I've done, and now I'm hoping the way that you guys can help me now is by helping me advocate for better coverage, better care. Because when I talk to legislators, and I work with Joe Kennedy's office a lot, when I talk to Joe, the one thing he always tells me is the problem with mental health care is that people don't want to tell their stories. They're ashamed. Their families are ashamed. I'm just going to say this, and I hope my family doesn't care, but we had one of my family members struggled with heroin addiction, opioid addiction, and my parents talk about it, and they discuss it because it's important, and you're not alone, and it happens to every family everywhere. But the problem is there's not enough people, not enough patients, for lack of a better word, who want to tell their stories. So I'm hopeful that you guys can help us tell our stories, that you can talk. And I know that there's HIPAA and you can't talk about your patient specifically, but that somehow we can find a way to work together to get people to treat mental health like physical health. Because if there is one obstacle that I still face, and that I think everyone who struggles with any kind of behavioral health issue, it's getting good care, and it's access to good care. I had an incident about 1.5 years ago, right before I saw Lisa, and I had a lot of anxiety, and I had to actually miss a couple days of work. And I remember calling around to get back on medication, and every psychiatrist that I called was like, "I'm sorry, I don't take your insurance anymore. I'm sorry, I don't take your insurance. I'm sorry, I can get you in 3 months." 3 months. I couldn't get out the door. I can't do that for 3 months. That has to change. It has to get better. We have to do something, because mental health affects your physical health. It is all interconnected. And I think the great thing about ABH is that it gets that. So when I toured the clubhouse in the Edinburgh Center with Donna and Ellen and Vic and Megan, I thought one of the coolest things, Donna, you said when we were at the clubhouse, you said one of the best pieces of the clubhouse was the fact that you're treated there beyond your disease. No one looks at you and no one sees you as your disease and you secondary. They treat you like you, and they believe in you. And then when we went to the Edinburgh Center, one of the clinicians said, "For us, we're family. For a lot of these people who have no one, they're family." And I felt like how grateful those people must be that they have the access to the clubhouse and the Edinburgh Center. But why can't everyone have that access? My parents had to empty their 401k to help my sibling go through what they went through. Empty their 401k. I'm lucky enough to have parents that have a 401k. I'm lucky enough to have good health insurance, to be able to pay out of pocket to see a therapist that changed my life. There are so many people out there who don't have that. And I don't know how we fix it, but I'm hoping we can fix it. So I just want to leave you guys, before we open it up to questions, with a quote, because I have it hanging on my desk at work, and it's a good reminder when you're like on TV and you work with Tangway and Felger, and like Minahan and Callahan, like, okay guys, there's something bigger out there. But I love you guys. The quote is from Franklin D. Roosevelt, and it says, "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little." I'm hoping we can, now that I've met all of you, sort of, that we can work together to find a way to give something to those who have too little. Thank you.